Okay, picture this. It's 2015. Bernie Sanders, running for president. He's got this rally going in Seattle.
Right. Standard campaign stuff.
Totally. Except then some Black Lives Matter activists, they actually take the stage, stop him from speaking.
I remember that.
And their goal, it wasn't just disruption. It was really about grabbing that media spotlight, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To force attention onto their concerns about how Black citizens are treated.
Absolutely. That moment, I think, really showed the raw power the media has to elevate an issue, to force it into the public conversation, whether people were comfortable with the tactic or not.
Exactly. It made it unavoidable. So for this deep dive, we're using the sources you share to really get into the weeds of the media world.
Yeah, trying to unpack it all.
We'll look at, what is media fundamentally? How did it get to be the way it is now? How's it regulated? Or maybe not regulated enough in places?
And crucially, the impact, the effect it has on, well, everything. Society, politics, how you see the world.
Our mission here is really to pull out the key insights for you so you can get a better handle on the forces shaping the news and information you consume every day.
We'll cover the different formats, TV, print, radio, the whole internet beast, social media look at who's pulling the strings and how that influences what we think and do.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What is the media? In basic terms.
Well, simply put, media just refers to all the ways we communicate information. But when we say mass media, we usually mean the channels that reach a really big audience.
Like the big ones we know.
Exactly. Television, newspapers, magazines, radio. And now, of course, the internet is a massive part of that. And ideally, the core job, especially for news media, is supposed to be covering important events, political, social, whatever, in a neutral, concise way.
Supposed to be, yeah. And it takes a whole team, right? It's not just one person talking into a camera.
Oh, definitely not. You've got your journalists, your reporters out there digging up the stories, then editors who are crucial for shaping that story, checking facts, adding context.
Kind of the quality control.
In a way, yes. Publishers handle the business side, especially for print or online. And in TV or radio, you have producers who are putting the whole show together, the visuals, the audio. It's a big operation.
And we should probably draw a line between that kind of news media and, say, public relations, right? Because they both communicate, but the goals are totally different.
That's a really important distinction. News media, ideally, aims for neutrality, informing the public. PR, on the other hand, is paid specifically to make their client, a company, a person, an organization, look good.
So one's about reporting facts, the other's about spinning them, essentially.
You could put it that way. PR professionals work to generate positive coverage and shape perception deliberately. A journalist's job should be to present the facts as objectively as possible. Big difference in intent.
Okay, let's break down the different types. Television, for example. Still a giant, but it's changed a lot.
It really has. And it's interesting, baby boomers are still the generation most likely to get their news from TV. And TV itself is so varied now. Scripted shows, reality TV, and then all the news programs.
You got the big networks.
Right, CBS, NBC, ABC. They work through local affiliate stations. So your local station carries the national news, but also does its own local reporting, which is super important.
And then cable came along.
Yeah, cable kind of bypassed the affiliates, went straight to the consumer. That allowed for those 24-hour news channels, CNN, MSNBC, FOX News, and specialized stuff like C-SPAN.
And now streaming on demand. That's shaking things up even more, especially for advertisers.
Absolutely. It's a whole different model, and it's forcing everyone to rethink how they reach audiences and, frankly, how they make money.
Okay, what about print? Newspapers, magazines, maybe not the force they once were, but still around.
Still around, yes. Print has that limitation of, physical distribution. It's not instant, but it often allows for more in-depth reporting, longer form analysis. Some people just prefer that physical reading experience too.
And radio. It feels like it should have died out ages ago, but it's still kicking.
It's surprisingly resilient, still huge for music, talk shows, sports, and it's evolved too. AM gave way to FM's better quality. Talk radio exploded in the 80s and 90s.
Right, figures like Rush Limbaugh became huge.
Exactly. Then satellite radio came along, subscription-based, coast to coast.
Yeah.
And now, well, podcasts.
Podcasts are massive now.
Unbelievably so. The growth is just exponential. On-demand, niche topics, celebrities jumping in, platforms like Spotify investing heavily. It's all accessible right on your phone or smart speaker.
Then there's the internet, the big disruptor.
Oh, absolutely. Blogs, news sites, social media. It created this instant global flow of information. In some ways, it's democratic. Anyone can discuss.
There's a downside.
Big time. The quality, the accuracy, it's all over the place. Without those traditional gatekeepers, misinformation can spread like wildfire. And even established outlets feel the pressure to publish instantly, which can lead to mistakes.
And social media specifically, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, it feels like its own universe, constantly shifting.
It really is. Each platform has its own culture, attracts different age groups, serves different functions, and they change so fast.
One big issue seems to be anonymity, right?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It can empower some people to speak freely, but it definitely fuels online abuse, harassment, and the spread of some really nasty stuff like conspiracy theories.
QAnon is a prime example of how that anonymity can be exploited.
So looking at this whole picture, it seems like a very small number of companies own most of this stuff. Is that right?
That's spot on. It's a critical point. Media ownership, especially in the US, has become incredibly concentrated. It's actually kind of shocking when you look at the numbers.
How concentrated are we talking?
Well, back in, say, 1983, you had about 50 companies owning the majority of US media outlets. Fast forward to just a few years ago, after tons of mergers, and it's down to basically 4 main players.
4 from 50. Who are they? Essentially, CBS, which is now Paramount Global Comcast, Warner Bros., Discovery, and Disney. That's a massive consolidation of power.
Wow. What are the worries about that? Why is that concentration potentially bad?
Well, the big fear is creating information monopolies. If only a few companies control what most people see and hear, they have huge power to shape the narrative, maybe limit the diversity of viewpoints.
Like censorship, almost. Or just choosing what gets covered.
It can lean that way, yeah. Whether it's deliberate censorship or just prioritizing certain stories over others because of corporate interest. There was that example where iHeartMedia, the giant radio company, reportedly wouldn't run ads for the St. Pete Pride Festival. That raises questions about their influence.
And this isn't just TV and radio, right? Newspapers, too.
Oh, yeah. Newspapers have consolidated massively as well, mainly due to financial pressures. Gannett is a huge chain, owns tons of local papers. Their attempt to buy A.H. Bello, which owned the Dallas Morning News, even got the Justice Department involved over antitrust concerns in one market. Shows how these deals can reduce local news diversity.
So these companies are businesses, they need to make money, ads, consumers.
Absolutely. Revenue is key. They need eyeballs, clicks, listeners.
But they also have these other, like, public service roles, don't they? It's kind of a balancing act.
It is. Or like it's supposed to be. Beyond profit, the media acts as a watchdog, the fourth estate, holding government and powerful institutions accountable.
Right.
They also perform agenda setting. Basically, they decide what issues we, the public, are going to talk about. Think about the Ethiopian famine coverage in the 80s. Or, more recently, Al Jazeera, really pushing the story about Haitian exiles in the Dominican Republic onto the world stage.
So they choose the topics.
To a large extent, yes. They can also promote the public good by providing a platform for debate, making people more aware of what's going on, especially locally. And then there's opinion and analysis editorials, commentary.
Like Walter Cronkite on Vietnam.
Exactly. His commentary is often cited as a moment that really shifted public opinion. And today you have op-eds, blogs like Daily Kos, all shaping how people understand complex events.
Okay, so we've got a handle on what media is today. Let's rewind. How did we get here? The evolution seems crucial, starting with print.
Makes sense. Print is where it all began, really. Those early newspapers in the colonies, like in Boston around 1704, they were vital for spreading information. And things like the stamp tax controversy showed that early tension between government trying to control the press and the press pushing back.
Then after the revolution, things got pretty partisan, didn't they? The party press era.
Very much so. Newspapers were often directly funded by political parties or factions. They were fiercely loyal, full of opinion, sometimes outright propaganda. The Federalist Papers are a classic example, essays published in newspapers to argue for the Constitution.
Then came the penny press. What made that different?
Technology and price. Around the 1830s, printing got faster and cheaper. Papers like the New York Sun cost just a penny, making them accessible to way more people, not just the wealthy elite.
What kind of news did they have?
Initially, a lot more human interest stuff, crime, even gossip to grab that mass audience. But over time, they expanded their coverage of politics and other news too. It democratized news consumption.
Which then led to yellow journalism? Sounds kind of shady.
It was a pretty wild period, late 19th century. Think Pulitzer's New York World versus Hearst's New York Journal. Lots of sensationalism, screaming headlines, exaggerated stories, maybe not always strictly factual, trying to outsell each other. Think tabloids, basically.
But people pushed back on that, wanted
Yeah.
something more factual.
Yeah, there was a reaction. Around the turn of the 20th century, figures like Adolph Ochs at the New York Times really championed a more informational model striving for objectivity, accuracy, serious reporting. This paved the way for
Muckracking.
exactly the progressive era. Investigative journalists exposing corruption, social ills. Upton Sinclair's The Jungle is a famous example that exposed the horrific conditions in meatpacking plants and led directly to new food safety laws. That's the power of investigative journalism.
It feels like that kind of deep, expensive reporting is harder to do now, with budgets being cut everywhere.
That's a huge concern. Digital pressures, shrinking revenues. It means fewer resources for those time-consuming investigations. And you have to ask, what stories aren't being told because of that? What corruption goes unchecked?
Yeah, and newspapers generally in the 21st century, they're facing a perfect storm, aren't they?
It's incredibly tough.
Yeah.
Ad revenue plummeted, subscriptions declined, they're trying everything, digital paywalls, social media integration, but many local papers have closed, newsrooms have shrunk, especially those covering state government, and ownership keeps consolidating. It's a challenging time for print.
Okay, let's switch gears to radio. That had a huge moment, too.
Oh, absolutely. Radio became a true mass medium in the 1920s. Networks like NBC and CBS brought news and entertainment-sponsored shows, dramas right into people's homes.
The 30s were the golden age, right?
Pretty much. Comedy, talk, religious shows, game shows. Radio was the medium. Shows like Amos and Andy, controversial now for its stereotypes, but massively popular then, and the Grand Ole Opry. It created this shared national culture.
And politicians quickly figured out how powerful it was.
Definitely. Harding gave regular speeches, Hoover too, but FDR, he mastered it with his fireside chats.
Right, talking directly to people.
Exactly. It felt personal, intimate. He used it brilliantly to explain the New Deal, rally support during the Depression and the war. It built immense trust and shaped public opinion like nothing before.
How did World War II change radio?
It made it indispensable for news. People needed instant updates faster than newspapers could deliver. Reporters like Edward R. Murrow, broadcasting live from London during the Blitz, that was incredibly powerful, brought the war home. The government also set guidelines about reporting sensitive information.
And there was regulation early on to manage the airwaves.
Yes, the airwaves were getting crowded, chaotic. So the Radio Act of 1927 created the Federal Radio Commission, the FRC, to assign frequencies, manage licenses. Then the Communications Act of 1934 replaced the FRC with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, giving it broader power over radio, eventually TV, and phones too.
What about radio more recently? How's it evolved?
Well, FM became dominant over AM for music due to better quality. Then in the 80s and 90s, talk radio had a huge boom, often politically conservative hosts like Rush Limbaugh, Don Imus.
Right.
Then came satellite radio, Sirius XM subscription, national, less SEC regulation, which allowed for more AG content, like Howard Stern moving there.
And podcasts, which we mentioned, they feel like the latest big radio evolution.
Completely. On-demand audio is just exploding. Huge variety, big investments, easy access. It's revitalized audio content in a massive way.
Okay, on to the big one. Visually, anyway, television.
Yeah, adding pictures changed everything. The first sort of official broadcast was FDR at the 1939 World's Fair, but it really took off after World War II. Early stuff was quiz shows, variety shows.
But serious journalism came too.
Oh, yes. Edward R. Murrow's See It. Now tackled important issues, showed TV's potential for investigative reporting. The networks expanded, local news became a staple, TV became the dominant source of information for decades.
And it completely changed politics, right? Seeing the candidates.
Fundamentally. Suddenly, body language, appearance, how you came across visually,
Yeah.
it all mattered. Eisenhower used TV ads effectively. Kennedy, especially, understood the visual medium, had that Hollywood look.
Nixon's checkers speech, that was TV saving his career, wasn't it?
Pretty much. He went directly to the public on TV to address financial impropriety accusations. Geraldine Ferraro used televised press conferences, too, when questions arose about her finances.
Yeah.
TV became the main stage.
And the debates. Kennedy-Nixon in 1960. Huge turning point.
Absolutely legendary. Nixon looked sweaty and uncomfortable. Kennedy looked cool and composed. People who listened on the radio thought Nixon won. People who watched on TV thought Kennedy won.
Yeah.
Showed the power of the visual. Televised debates became standard after that.
There was sort of a golden age of presidents using TV.
Yeah, roughly the 60s to the 90s. Presidents used it masterfully during crises. Think Clinton after Oklahoma City, Bush after 9/11.
Yeah.
That ability to address the nation directly, foster unity, the rally around the flag effect. TV was central.
But then cable, the internet, things got fragmented again. Like radio, but maybe even more so.
Exactly. Suddenly, hundreds of channels, then infinite websites, no longer everyone watching the same thing. That led to information overload, maybe voter fatigue, even suspicion of media. Viewership for things like the State of the Union dropped.
And pundits, talk show hosts, filled some of that space.
Yeah, opinionated hosts, commentators gained prominence, and campaign coverage shifted too.
So,
Less focus on deep policy dives, more on the horse race. Who's up, who's down, who made a gaffe. Campaigns try to control this with tight message control, staying on message, creating that bubble.
but social media pushes back against that control, doesn't it? Candidates can speak directly.
That's the counter trend. Trump's Twitter use is the prime example. Obama used YouTube early on to respond to controversies directly. It bypasses the media filter, for better or worse.
And citizen journalism, too. People recording things on their phones.
Huge impact. Think Mitt Romney's 47% comment, Obama's cling to guns or religion, the Billy Bush tape, all captured by ordinary people or leaked, then exploded online. Changes the game completely.
And younger people seem drawn to different formats now, like soft news.
Yeah, shows like The Daily Show, Last Week Tonight, they blend comedy and news. It's entertainment, but can also raise awareness about serious issues for an audience that might not watch traditional news.
Okay, so this massive evolving media machine, it clearly needs some rules. Let's talk regulation. How is it all overseen?
Right. It's complex because you have this tension between freedom of the press, which is vital in a democracy, and the need to prevent harm or abuse.
Starting with the First Amendment, that's the bedrock, right?
Absolutely. Freedom of the press.
Yeah.
The idea is that a free press is essential to hold government accountable, inform citizens. Thomas Jefferson famously said he'd prefer newspapers without a government to a government without newspapers.
Strong words.
Yeah. And even the Constitution drafting, while secret itself, was heavily debated in the newspapers of the day. The First Amendment explicitly says Congress can't make laws abridging the freedom of the press. It's fundamental. And early court cases, like John Peter Zenger's trial back in colonial times, established precedents against punishing criticism of the government, what was called seditious libel.
But it's not absolute freedom, is it? There are limits.
Correct. Defamation is a key one. That's slander, which is spoken falsehoods meant to harm reputation, and libel, which is written or published falsehoods.
So you can't just print lies about someone.
Not if it causes harm and meets the legal standards. But it's harder for public figures to win libel cases. The New York Times v. Sullivan case set a high bar. Public figures have to prove actual malice, meaning they have to show the publisher knew the information was false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. It's a tough standard, designed to protect robust public debate. Private citizens have a lower burden of proof. Katie Holmes won a libel suit against Star magazine, showing it does happen.
What about classified information, national security stuff? Can the media publish anything?
That's another tricky area. The government does have a limited ability to stop publication beforehand. That's called prior restraint. But only in really extreme cases where publication would cause direct, immediate, irreparable harm, like revealing troop movements in wartime.
The Pentagon Papers case?
Exactly. The Supreme Court mostly sided with the newspapers there, saying the government hadn't met that incredibly high bar for prior restraint. But the possibility exists. Remember Geraldo Rivera getting in trouble for revealing troop positions on air during the Gulf War? That's the kind of sensitivity involved.
Okay, so that's the First Amendment framework. What about the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission? What's their role?
The FCC regulates broadcast media, radio, and TV stations that use the public airwaves. Not print, not cable generally, not the internet directly in the same way. They were created by the Communications Act of 1934.
What do they regulate?
They issue licenses to stations, set rules about things like how much advertising can be shown, require stations to serve the public interest in some ways, and enforce rules against indecency and obscenity on the airwaves.
Like the equal time rule, we hear about that during elections.
Right. That requires broadcasters, again, not cable, to offer candidates for the same office equal opportunities to buy airtime or appear on air. Usually applies close to an election.
So if one candidate buys an ad,
Their opponents have to be offered the chance to buy similar ad time and similar rates. It can get complicated, like when Trump hosted SNL, other candidates demanded equal time. News coverage itself is exempt, though.
what about the fairness doctrine? That sounds important, but it's gone now.
It was. From 1949 to 1987, it required broadcasters to cover controversial issues and to include contrasting viewpoints. Its repeal is seen by many as a major factor in the rise of more partisan talk radio and cable news.
And indecency. The FCC polices swear words and stuff.
Sort of. They regulate indecent material, basically. Descriptions of sexual or excretory functions that are patently offensive by community standards for broadcast. Obscenity is a stricter legal standard and gets no protection. There's a safe harbor from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. when indecent material is less restricted.
Like the Janet Jackson Super Bowl incident. That got big fines.
Exactly. The FCC relies heavily on public complaints to start investigations. Even scheduling conflicts, like airing something adult-themed right after a kid's show like Charlie Brown, can trigger complaints and FCC action.
And regulation changes over time, like that big 1996 act.
Oh, yeah. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 was huge. It aimed to deregulate the industry, and a major effect was loosening media ownership rules. That directly led to more consolidation, bigger media conglomerates.
Fewer owners, like we talked about.
Precisely. Critics say it reduced diversity and focus on local public interest. More recently, the whole net neutrality fight is about regulating internet service providers.
Right, whether ISPs can block or slow down certain content or charge more for faster access.
Exactly. Obama's FCC put rules in place. Trump's FCC repealed them. California passed its own law. The Biden administration is signaling a potential return. It's an ongoing battle about how the internet should be governed.
What about transparency? Getting access to government information, how is that regulated?
There are sunshine laws at federal and state levels that require government meetings and records to be open to the public. The idea is accountability.
And the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA.
That's the big federal one, passed in '66. It lets citizens and journalists request documents from executive branch agencies. There are exemptions, of course, for national security, personnel files, confidential sources, etc., but it's a key tool for reporters. Demand has skyrocketed, though, leading to big backlogs.
Does the government control journalists' access in other ways?
Sure, there's always been a negotiation. Accreditation during wars goes way back. Embedding journalists with troops, like in Iraq in 2003, is a form of managed access. Different presidents have different styles, too.
Some more open, some less.
Definitely. Wilson clamped down during WWI. H.W. Bush limited access to Dover Air Force Base when soldiers' bodies returned. Obama promised transparency but was criticized for limiting access sometimes. Trump had a very combative relationship, calling outlets fake news, banning some from briefings. Biden's is more traditional, but maybe fewer formal press conferences initially. The White House press office always tries to manage the message.
What about protecting sources? Reporters' privilege.
Crucial for investigative work. Think Watergate and Deep Throat. Journalists rely on confidential sources, but legally, it's not absolute. Judith Miller went to jail for refusing to name a source. Edward Snowden's leaks highlighted the tension. The Supreme Court in Brandsburg v. Hayes said reporters don't have an absolute right to refuse grand jury subpoenas. It's a constant push and pull, and depends a lot on the current administration's stance.
Okay, wow. So we have the media, its history, its rules. Now, the big question. What impact does it all have on us? On politics?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting and honestly debated. Early ideas were kind of simplistic, the hypodermic needle theory, like the media just injects ideas into you.
Yeah, that wasn't right.
Mostly discredited. Then came the minimal effects theory that media mostly just reinforces what you already believe, also probably too simplistic.
So what are the current ideas?
More nuanced. Cultivation theory suggests long-term exposure, especially to TV, shapes your view of reality. You start to think the real world is more like the TV world.
And framing.
That's about how the story is told.
Yeah.
What aspects are emphasized, what context is given. Framing Syrian refugees as a border crisis versus a humanitarian crisis leads to very different audience reactions. It guides how you understand the issue.
Okay, and priming.
Priming is about setting the stage. If the media covers unemployment constantly, that issue becomes more important in your mind when you, say, evaluate the president. It primes you to use that specific criterion.
How does all this play out in government and political campaigns? It feels like campaigns live and die by media coverage.
To a large extent, they do. The media can be kingmakers in primaries, focusing attention on certain candidates. Campaigns are obsessed with managing coverage, spinning narratives, staying in that bubble.
And the coverage itself. You mentioned the horse race focus.
Yeah, less on policy details, more on strategy, gaffes, scandals, pack journalism where everyone covers the same thing. Pew Research found in 2012 way more coverage focused on campaign strategy than on the candidates' actual stances on issues.
And sound bites keep getting shorter.
Dramatically. Nixon got maybe 40 seconds on average. By the 2000s, it was down to like 8 seconds. Forces candidates into attack lines or simple slogans. Less room for nuance. Even the shots of candidates are shorter.
Plus, cable news seems more biased, more negative now.
Research certainly points that way. Studies comparing FOX News and MSNBC coverage, for instance, show clear differences in framing and tone, whether it's elections or issues like COVID-19.
But social media lets campaigns bypass that negativity sometimes. Go direct.
It's their attempt to, anyway. Direct messaging, fundraising, pushing back against media narratives. We saw it with Romney and Obama in 2012. Trump and Clinton in 2016 obviously took it to another level. Trump's Twitter suspension was a big moment. Biden uses it more cautiously.
How presidents handle the press varies a lot, too.
Huge variation. FDR had informal agreements. JFK embraced televised press conferences. Then you get confrontational moments, like Dan Rather versus Nixon or H.W. Bush. Trump's approach, again, very unique tweets, fake news attacks, excluding outlets. Biden is more conventional. But every White House tries to control the message through the press secretary communications office.
Does media coverage actually affect policy or just perception?
It seems to affect perception more easily. Coverage often focuses on presidential personality, leadership, rather than policy details. Obama struggled to get sustained, positive coverage for big initiatives like the Recovery Act or the ACA amidst the political noise.
What about Congress?
Harder for individual members to get consistent media attention, unless they're in leadership or involved in a scandal. There is evidence media coverage can influence the policy agenda, though highlighting an issue like drug deaths might spur legislative action, like the DARE program years ago. But the agenda-setting power seems stronger on the president, who's one national figure, versus the diffuse body of Congress.
And beyond politics, how does media impact society more broadly, our understanding of social issues?
Profoundly. Agenda setting shapes what we think about. If crime is constantly highlighted, people might think it's worse than statistics show.
And how different groups are portrayed.
That's critical. Research consistently finds biases in racial portrayals. Crime news often overrepresents Black perpetrators and underrepresents Black victims. Poverty coverage often overrepresents Black individuals. These framings reinforce stereotypes and can absolutely impact public opinion on policies related to race, welfare, criminal justice.
Even word choices matter, like illegal immigrant.
Yes, that's priming. Using illegal immigrant versus undocumented immigrant primes different responses and attitudes. Language matters immensely.
What about the portrayal of women in newsrooms and in politics?
Historically, pretty bad. Women journalists fought for serious beats, weren't taken seriously initially. Coverage of women politicians often focused on novelty, appearance, or viability, can she win, rather than substance. Think Barbara Walters paving the way.
Did that discourage women from running?
Evidence suggests yes. Concerns about harsh, often personalized media scrutiny, the impact on family. Sarah Palin's experience is often cited. Things are changing, though. We saw a record number of women run and win in 2020, and Kamala Harris became VP. But the way media frames female candidates is still something scholars watch closely.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly comprehensive. We've really covered a lot of ground, what media is, how it grew, the rules, the massive impact.
It's a huge topic, from those early partisan papers to today's giant conglomerates to the chaos of social media. It's been quite a journey, and it shapes so much of our reality.
Absolutely. We've seen how it functions, how regulations try and sometimes fail to keep up, and just how deeply it influences what you think, who you vote for, how you see the world.
Yeah, the evolution continues. The challenges remain, especially that concentration of ownership and the sheer speed of the 200/4/7 cycle.
Which leads to a final thought, really, for you listening. Given everything we've talked about, the ownership, the speed, the framing, the potential for bias, how can you become a sharper, more critical consumer of information?
It's a real challenge.
How do you actively push yourself to find different perspectives, to question the narratives you're given, and ultimately build your own informed understanding of what's really going on? That's the homework, I guess. Something to keep working on.